to continue, Mr. Thompson.
Yes, thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Gibb. I hope that I've now found the right number, which is CD 247.
I have that.
And what I'm hoping is that this shows the northern elevation in Scheme 2. So it's like the one we looked at before. And it's really just to see what the differences are, especially at the west end. And again, it's really the difference in levels that I'm interested in to start with. What is the cladding that we see the little people walking along beside?
That's natural stone cladding.
And again, the colour this time, any change?
No change.
And could you just help us to appreciate what it is we're looking at, where the two new wings link to the Hamilton building?
So here the upper ground floors of both wings come across and link into the north elevation of the Hamilton building. You can see on each of the elevations at each end of the Hamilton building that there are two windows, one set higher than the other. And then where we link in, that's an existing blind window, so there isn't and there hasn't ever been any glazing in that recess that we are taking our link into there.
And are we seeing here what the appearance of the north facade of the Hamilton building itself would look like under the Phase 2 proposals, the Scheme 2 proposals?
This is an elevation drawing of the north elevation of the two wings and the Hamilton building.
And so,
so we see in the centre of the Hamilton building the three apertures for the entrance to the hotel, east and west, and that there are glazed galleries with vertical copper elements. Then you come to the end portions of the Hamilton building and then where the wings attach in. I think there's also there's a visualisation, view 16 I think, from Nelson's Monument that shows this in a wider context.
I'm just looking along at the east end of the east gable. There are what look like two slightly squashed people. Can you just help me about what's happening there at the east end of the east?
Of the Hamilton building or of the east wing?
Sorry, of the east wing. Sorry if they're off the table.
They would be standing against the east boundary wall of the site.
But they wouldn't be able to go to the south because their access would terminate there.
That's correct.
And again, does this show quite helpfully the differing layers of the end of Regent Terrace, some trees, and the east end of the east wing?
Yes, it does.
Are those existing trees, proposed trees, retained trees?
just an indication of trees that were, although I believe have been substantially taken away from the slope to the side of the site since this.
And again, just thinking about the east end of the east wing, it's slightly further east in Scheme 2 than in Scheme 1, is that right?
That's correct. It's about 2.5, 3 metres further east.
Thank you. Now, putting the drawings to one side, I wonder if I could ask you one or two questions, please, about your precognition and your evidence generally. And I'd like to start with paragraph 7 of your precognition, where you say that the nature of the accommodation being proposed in both schemes is specific to a world-class luxury hotel. It is both unsuitable and unsustainable for any hotel operator other than the luxury end of the hotel market. Now, what I wanted to ask you first was, does an architect like you have the sort of expertise that someone can walk into your office and say, I'd like to have a top-of-the-range hotel, I'd like 150 bedrooms, please design something for me? I would assume that you had the expertise to know how much back of premises space you needed, how many seats you needed in the restaurant, whether you needed a swimming pool, if so, how big. Is that the sort of knowledge that an architect like you has, or do you look something up, or are you briefed by the client?
All of the above, I would say. You went into probably more detail than I would say that somebody walking in. I wouldn't profess to know how big a swimming pool they needed, but there was something in what you said. I've explained this in more detail in my inquiry report, paragraph 2.9. But essentially, different levels of different operators servicing different points in the market essentially have differing amounts of overall building that they, on average, have to provide. And at the luxury end of the market, the operators work on a rule of thumb of approximately 100 square metres per key for the total development.
I was thinking of going a little further than just the bedrooms and wondering about all the other facilities that needed to be contained in the hotel. I can see that you have a rule of thumb area for the bedrooms, and that dictates a certain amount of size. But is there some reference that you have for how much space you need in addition to that to service all the ancillary facilities, both behind and front of house, to support whatever the number of bedrooms that you're looking for is?
Yes, sorry, I should have explained that more fully. The 100 square metre figure there is a gross figure for the total development, so that would include all back of house, all front of house, the total hotel development divided by the number of rooms.
And when you come to actually draw the plans that we've been looking at, how do you know how big to make the restaurant, for example? How do you know how big to make the lounge? How many lounges you're going to need? What range of restaurants? Do you need one big one or several small ones? How do you get that sort of information?
That level would come from hotel operators.
And when your practice received the instructions for the first scheme, was Rosewood on board at that time as the operator?
For Scheme 1?
Yes.
No.
So was it a generic design that you were looking at that stage? In other words, a developer was coming and saying, I want a design for a high-end hotel, but I don't have an operator yet, so you tell me what we need.
The developer and ourselves had met, discussed with a number of different hotel operators over the intervening years of the project. So that had built up a picture of, in general terms, the type of accommodation that was going to be necessary. At that point, we wouldn't have been talking about exactly how many seats were in the restaurant or whether there was a whiskey bar or not. So that detail would have come later.
Yeah. So, but by the time you got to the Scheme 1 application stage and all the drawings were there, what further input had you had to enable you to get to that level of the refinement of the design?
Okay, so yes, by that point, the detail of the plans and their arrangement and the disposition of spaces had all been reviewed by the operator.
So,
and although we, as a practice, didn't have direct contact with the operator, that the plans were being approved by the operator in terms of them being sustainable and viable and functional for their requirements.
So by the time that the 2015 Scheme 1 application went in, you'd got operator approval for the detailed design.
That's my recollection of the sequence of events.
And did the same thing happen in relation to Scheme 2?
Yes, it did.
Now, you've already touched on this, and I think you've given me the answer, but I'd just like to make sure that I understand it. If you go to paragraph 2.9 in your report, where you mention the areas, what I had been looking at up to that point was APP3, which is one of the HVS reports. And perhaps you could have that to hand, please. I think the report itself is dated August 2015. Although the covering letter, somewhat confusingly, is February 2017. But if we turn to page 7, there's a helpful table of characteristics of luxury hotels compared to other lesser grades. And what I had been looking at was the floor area requirements in the luxury 6 to 7 star column, which was given at 35 to 60 square meters as the guest room size. What I was quite unable to do, but I hope you'll be able to help me, is relate that to your 100 square meter figure, which you describe as gross. Presumably gross is quite different from the actual room size.
That's right. So the other things that you'll see in that column from the top, reception, concierge, butler, just leading down, large rooms, a la carte,
Yeah.
meetings, and all the rest. The gross figure of 100 square meters per key includes all of that. So it's the room size plus the corridors plus all everything that makes up the development. So you can see from there that the rooms may only equate to anything from a third up to half of the total area.
Well, you'll appreciate what I wanted to check was whether the actual room sizes that you've drawn in these plans we looked at before lunch are within the range of 35 to 60 square metres.
I believe we have rooms below the 35 square metre that indicates there. But as I said, the plans have operator sign off for what they show and what they provide.
Yeah. And then there's also a suite ratio of anything from 20 to 100% for this category of hotel. What's the suite ratio that you've got?
I don't have that to hand, but it is less than 20%.
Is that in both schemes?
Yes, sir.
It's a trivial point, but I noticed that there's valet parking as one of the benefits of this category of hotel. Is the provision for valet parking or off-site parking or on-site parking apart from the 6 disabled spaces?
Sorry, could I return to my last answer? I do have a...
Please.
I've just got my own area schedule for Scheme 1. I don't have Scheme 2. But for Scheme 1, the suites equate to 25% of the total.
And does your original answer hold good for Scheme 2, or would you like to check that as well?
I don't have that information with me. Sorry, I don't have that information with me.
But no doubt you could make that available to the reporters.
I could do, yes, absolutely.
Yes, I just drifted into valet parking. Is that something that's consideration has been given to?
Yes, there's a transport report as part of both applications. Afraid I don't have the CD number. But the expectation is that there'd be, for a hotel like this, with the operator's experience, be very little requirement for guest parking, and as it would be required, something like a valet parking arrangement would be put in place.
Would a hotel like this have its own chauffeur-driven cars available for guests?
I don't know that for certain, but that might well be the case.
So an international visitor would presumably just get a taxi in from the airport?
That's the expectation, yes.
They wouldn't come on the tram with a wheelie suitcase?
They may do, sir. They could take the walk up Waterloo Place and...
Well, the staff may do that. You're not seriously suggesting that the guests in this sort of hotel would be doing that, are you? I'm not familiar with what other guests would be doing, but I do know and have been told that there would be a low expectation of customer guest driving to the hotel. Now, putting that specification to one side, and going back to your recognition, you talk about the 7 principles on page 5 in paragraph 10.
Yes, I have that.
And you say that in paragraph 11 that with one notable exception, you think that they're all met. The notable exception being number 4, about the needing to push the building back as far as possible. Would you agree that I think almost all of the other principles, it's very much a matter of professional opinion, the extent to which they're met or not.
Yes, I can see that.
Yeah.
I think I did question whether we, in terms of how we view the site, we have indeed pushed the development back as far as possible, so I guess they could all be considered to be read like that.
Yes, thank you. And then just another brief point. In paragraph 14 of your recognition, you discuss the worst-case scenario point in relation to the photomontages. Would you agree that looking at a worst-case scenario is an aspect of the precautionary principle?
My understanding of LVIA, and I will rely on Mr. Van Grieken for this, is that I do understand that. That I would say, though, that in the conversations that I was part of, that wasn't the context in which the phrase was presented.
But if it is part of the precautionary principle, would it also be relevant in that context to consider how precious the asset is that's potentially being damaged by prospective development?
I would agree with that.
And I know this isn't your field, so I'll just take it very generally, if I may. If you are anxious about what a new building like this is going to look like, you can discuss viewpoints and you can decide how many, and you can argue about how many is too many and so on. But that aside, there are 365 days in the year and all sorts of different lighting conditions, and a lot may depend on what day you take the original base photograph. So if one is trying to exercise a degree of caution, it may be relevant to consider such things as seasonality, especially when there's a reflective surface being used as a major element of the external cladding.
I think I would rather leave that to Mr. Van Grieken, but I would like to not have the production of the Scheme 1 photomontages characterised as an argument, to use your phrase, because I found that a constructive process where we went out and took through the ZTV, I don't know, 60, 70 views, came back, discussed with CEC, we matched views from the Edinburgh skyline as requested to do so. We widened angles of view as required to do so in every base photograph, and I wasn't surprised to then see the planners refer to that as a comprehensive visual analysis for Scheme 1. That was how we saw it as well.
And of course, photomontages are only a tool when all's said and done.
Absolutely.
Turning to paragraph 16, you refer to the massing analysis produced by the Council Planning Department. Could you just look, please, at CD 383? I just want to make sure that that was what you're talking about here.
There were a few versions of this. If you just...
But is this at least an example of what you're talking about?
Yes, it appears to be, yes.
And as I understand your evidence in paragraph 16, you and the team weren't particularly impressed by this because you had a different view of what Hamilton's original intention was.
Our views on it weren't just because we had a different view. There were a number of aspects that came out in this document that hadn't been our understanding of even the council's view of the site before this point. So, for example, on the landscape page, an area of 1970s PSA car park planting is noted as of high importance to setting. On the potential height page, the notion that there is the potential for accommodation to the west of Hamilton, but that is best located not just where the existing classroom block is, which I might have expected, but actually forward of that, completely blocking the view and route to the rear of the Hamilton building. It didn't, and it not only it didn't take into account of the work that we had done and presented for Scheme 1 in any of these aspects. And while I knew that there was differences of opinion, there was elements of this that I felt were a surprise at the time.
And just to get the time frame, this is between the refusal of Scheme 1 and the application for Scheme 2.
Yes.
And did you follow this guidance in preparing Scheme 2?
Not in its entirety. There is elements of this guidance that we, of course, did follow, but taken as a whole and taken as a, if we look at the potential height page as a mechanism for producing a strategy for developing the site, we didn't consider that to be appropriate for any development on the site, whether a hotel or not.
Well, not to put too fine a point on it, you couldn't possibly get the number of bedrooms you required into the height limits. We couldn't, but even if we were proposing a building at height AOD 79.62 in the west, we would suggest that there was less detrimental locations to the west of Hamilton for that. Yes. But you couldn't possibly fit 150 bedrooms into the height and massing that's contained in this?
No, we couldn't.
Thank you. Now, there's one other document I'd like to ask you about, please, and it's, at least I hope it's CD 202. A revised world-class hotel proposal at the former Royal High School. Arts and Culture Strategy, 10th February 2017. Have you seen this before?
I have. I may not be the witness for this, but...
Who would be?
Without hearing the question, it might be Gary Mappin.
Well, we'll have a look at it and see how far we get. The timing of this document suggests that it was part of the Scheme 2 application.
I think that's right, yes.
And if you look into it at Appendix 1, which is at page 13. There are 2 pages to Appendix 1, pages 13 and 14, entitled Public Access. Could you just have a look at those and tell me whether they relate to Scheme 1 or Scheme 2?
They relate to Scheme 1.
Can you think why public access plans for Scheme 1 should be incorporated in a document apparently supporting Scheme 2?
Other than an error, no, I can't.
And what I'm interested in is just the general concept, first of all, where we find the vision at page 3. In the second sentence, we see that the vision is for an inclusive and publicly accessible yet world-class hotel. Now, pausing there, is there an inherent tension between public accessibility and a world-class hotel? In other words, the people who are paying a great deal of money to stay at a top-of-the-range hotel may not want to have the general public milling around in the same area that they've paid a great deal of money to be in. What was the point I'm thinking about?
I don't believe there to be that tension. My understanding of this operator is that isn't a tension that concerns them, and that they are inclusive.
So going on in that sentence, bringing the best hospitality opportunities to the local community for careers and the best hospitality experience for locals and visitors to enjoy. As evidenced in Rosewood's London Hotel, the public spaces will be places where visitors and locals will enjoy shared appreciation of the ingenuity of Hamilton's masterpiece in a new and enhanced setting where accessibility underpins the exceptional.
So I'm not objecting to this, but I can confirm Mr. Mappin is the witness who is in a position to answer the detail of this.
Thank you.
Simply with a view to saving time.
Yeah, I'll continue if I may. And I hope it'll become apparent why. What I wanted to ask you about, Mr. Gibb, was the extent to which consideration was given in the detailed layout to the desire to accommodate both non-resident visitors and resident visitors. For example, if you're thinking about how big a restaurant needs to be, how do you know how much space you need to cater for the 127, 147 people who are staying in the hotel, and how much space you need to provide for visitors from the city? Or is that something that you haven't considered?
The starting point for the consideration was that those facilities were best provided within the Hamilton building, thereby affording as wide a range of people as possible access to the Hamilton building. In other words, there was no bedrooms put in the Hamilton building. The spaces are obviously already fixed in size, and the operator took the plans as produced and agreed to the size and quantity and capacity of that was being provided.
But someone who was attending a function in the west wing of Scheme 2 might have a whole function experience without ever setting foot in the Hamilton building.
Yes, that's true. That goes for both schemes, because the whole west wing function facility can be accessed from the west or front with no requirement to be in the Hamilton building. That's true.
And they might not even see the Hamilton building or barely catch a glimpse of it if they entered through the tip of the west wing.
I think they would have seen a view up to the north to the temple at the back, and round the front.
At the back. Well, if we move on to the opportunities for integration of artwork at section 5 on page 6. This is where consideration is given to how the hotel design could accommodate arts and culture, as I understand it. And 5.1a, renewed visual appreciation of access to Carlton Hill. I think we can understand that. B, the reinstated retaining wall in the Belvedere Tower. Again, we're familiar with that. Western and eastern terraces. These terraces sit lower than the principal centrepiece facade and were formerly used as access between classrooms. As terraces, they will remain open, overlooking new unfussy landscaping and views beyond, and will provide excellent locations for temporary seasonal installations. Now, how would they be accessed in phase 2? In scheme 2?
That would be from Regent Road. So there could be as this is describing, an art installation or something that would have its own route from Regent Road onto the terrace to view it.
And again, someone visiting that event wouldn't set foot in the Hamilton building in the sense of any enclosed part of the Hamilton building.
They could go around the building and enter the main front entrance of the hotel, main entrance of the hotel.
But they couldn't get from there to, or how could they get from there to this terrace in Scheme 2?
No, they'd have to walk round the west wing and up to the front door.
Then next, the Western and Eastern Link Gardens. Again, what would be the access position in Scheme 2?
Could I take a drawing for that?
Please. I think it's 227 or 228 that you'd need. 227, 228.
So, those areas aren't indicated as accessible in Scheme 2.
And then next, western entrance to events and conferencing space, E. That's what we've just been talking about, that you might come and go to an event there without setting foot in the Hamilton building at all. And that, I think, is the end of the list. We then move on to interior locations. The first one well, what is the first one? Lounges, libraries, bars, all-day dining areas, and winter gardens with accessible outside terraces. This has a slight flavour of Scheme 1 about it, doesn't it? My much missed whiskey bar.
Still there's bars in Scheme 2 as well. I think the reference to accessible outdoor terraces is what you're referring to.
Yes.
I mean, they are still accessible. I acknowledge that they're not accessible from inside the building.
And this sort of scope for arts and culture would be principally hanging pictures and putting pieces of static artwork?
I would imagine art would take many forms beyond those you mentioned. That would be for the artists.
Well, what I was wondering was whether you'd envisage a jazz ensemble playing in any of these places.
I could see that happening, yes. And I think part of the application refers to areas that have acoustic treatment to windows and the like to ensure that's all.
Well, the next one is the main entrance, reception hall and gallery. Now that's the principal reception area, I take it. Have you applied your mind to how those functions in that space are consistent with performance opportunities? In other words, how would someone trying to check in cope with performance art going on?
That would be a hotel management operation. I understand check-in operations in a hotel of this nature to be slightly different to other non-luxury hotel brands, but I could see all that working perfectly happily together in the reception hall,
including checking out and concierge.
Yes.
And the main entrance to the hotel.
Yes, I think the space makes all that compatible.
And the main access route from the west wing to the swimming pool in Scheme 2.
Yes.
Then I think the final internal space is the North Gallery's west and east links. These, I take it, are in Scheme 2, would be the glazed upper ground level links.
Yes, they architecturally slightly different, but they apply to both schemes.
And would those links, in your view, be suitable for even for hanging pictures and perhaps the odd piece of static artwork?
I think they could be. Absolutely. They're generous in width, and there could be there could definitely be art or something of that nature displayed in those north-facing spaces.
And again, just to be clear, in Scheme 2, that could relate only to the two links at upper ground level, whereas in Scheme 1 it could include the link at lower ground level to the west. Is that right?
Yes, I don't believe that's what this is referring to, but there are public spaces, a lower foyer and corridors running east-west that could and I'm sure would be used for these kind of purposes.
But do you understand this to be referring to the upper ground level?
I do.
Thank you. And could you look finally, please, at the executive summary? The third paragraph.
Is that on the next page, sorry?
No, I'm afraid it's gone back to the beginning.
Of course.
Just to be confusing, it's page 2. The second page of the executive summary. And the third paragraph on that page. As the former RHS goes through its restoration and opens up for public use for the first time in its 187-year history, spaces will be specially designed to allow exhibitions, performances, lectures, and demonstrations to take place. And my question, Mr. Gibb, is, were you asked, or was anyone in your practice asked, specially to design such spaces, or any such space?
There's not documentation or design within the applications of that nature. I would understand this to be referring more to interior design work that would happen as part of the development.
But were you ever asked specifically to design an arts and culture space?
I see. Well, something like the link galleries at the back are deeper than they need be just to provide for purely circulation. So that was an opportunity to provide new internal space that could accommodate circulation and artwork.
And is your position that that depth of corridor was specifically designed with art in mind?
That was one of the part of the client brief, yes.
Thank you. Anything on the performance art side? Any performance art space specifically designed?
I mean, my understanding from the developer and operator was that there was no this was something to permeate the whole hotel experience, not any specific space.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gibb. Thank you, Saz.
Thanks for that, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Mackay, do you need 5 minutes or so to get yourself ready?
No, I'm ready to proceed now. So
You mentioned the other day that you were...
that was just... I have the relevant witness nearby,
perfect.
so I'm fine, thank you, sir.
Continue.
Good afternoon, Mr. Gibb. Can I please ask you to have before your inquiry report, and it might also be helpful to have CDs 10 and 607 available as well. So, first of all, can I take you to your inquiry report at pages 46 and 47? Just before I ask you questions about those, the text on those pages, on the subject of visualizations, I've asked you to have a look at 607. It's one of the... I'm sorry, do you not have that yet?
Sorry, yes, I have it.
It's one of a suite of documents that are lodged as CD 603 to 610. I think I'm right in saying from the from the same location, but showing either Scheme A or Scheme B as they're described in the document references, and also during the day and at night. Now, they all contain the initials GH, and the first question really is does that mean they were prepared by Gareth Hoskin Associates? Have you seen those visualizations before?
I have seen them. They don't look like produced by Hoskins Architects.
The reason I'm asking that is because for each of the documents, they're entitled. Their title has a GH abbreviation or reference embedded within the title, which does tend to suggest that they're the product of your consultancy firm.
We lodged some visualizations as part of the applications with a drawing, each with a drawing number. And on those drawings, we reference which firm produced each image. These look like one of them, and that I don't believe they were prepared by Hoskins Architects. I have seen them before, but I'm just struggling to place them in context.
Is that something that the appellant's team would be able to confirm? Just it's quite useful to know why they're lodged, who lodged them, and what purpose they're supposed to serve.
I'm sorry, I was concentrating on something else at the time. My apologies.
No trouble. It's CD 603.
Just focus it again. Thank you.
Yes, it's CD 603 to 610. There are a series of visualisations, or what on the face of it, at least bear to be visualisations, and each of those have a drawing number which includes GH. And I'm trying to get to the bottom of who prepared those visualisations.
Well, my understanding from two instructing solicitors is that these are the walk-through visualisations that Mr Taverner in due course will speak to by Hayes Davidson, if I've got the name of the producers correct. It would not be for this witness. The learned friend wishes to consult with others across the room, so be it.
Well, for present purposes, Mr Gibb, they're not the work of your consultancy, despite the reference. Is that correct?
Yeah, the GH doesn't refer to... I mean, my firm's Hoskins Architects, so I don't know what the GH refers to.
All right, thank you. Now, at 612 of your inquiry report, at page 46, you say it was patently not a preoccupation of Hamilton to create an illusion of countryside in the city. That said, Mr Gibb, is it fair to acknowledge that Hamilton did take advantage of the landscape setting of Carlton Hill, which includes Rousseau illusions?
Yes, that's fair.
And that seems to be the view of Hoskins Associates at the time of the design and access statement, which supported the first application. That's document CD41, which we looked at in the evidence. Is that right? Do you recall looking at that document at that point in time? Maybe to refresh your memories, it's CD41, please.
I do recall.
And if you go to page 43 of the document, electronic page 22. Were you involved in the preparation of this document?
I was.
Was Mr Hoskins involved in the preparation of the document?
He was.
And the paragraph that we're concerned with is on the left-hand side of the page at the bottom, and that's the paragraph I'm referring to. Does that help you?
Yes, I think there we're referring to the asymmetric composition created by the ancillary buildings, maintaining that feeling of picturesque and Rosenherb. That's what it says.
Yes, you're saying that those create an asymmetric composition across the school site which can be seen as reflecting the overall picturesque setting and maintaining the feeling of Rosenherb, the illusion of countryside within the city when approached from the west. So that,
that's
that impression is maintained.
That's not Hamilton's asymmetric strategy. That's what's been generated by the other buildings on the site. Yeah.
Yes. So to come back to the point I put to you a moment ago, Hamilton's taking advantage of that setting, which includes the contrast between built elements and natural elements.
No, sorry. I think this is saying that the asymmetric composition that's been generated by the other ancillary buildings, not Hamilton's, only Hamilton's work.
Well, if we take it one step at a time, then please, just to understand your position. First of all, who actually wrote this part of the document? You or Mr Hoskins?
I don't recall that. We wrote sections, proofread. It was a team effort.
All right. So it says, in responding to the prevailing townscape design philosophy of the day, Hamilton could be said to have composed the classical architectural elements of his design in a picturesque way, and he certainly used the juxtaposition of building and landscape to his advantage on the site. And that, in essence, is taking advantage of the Russenurb.
Well, it's taking advantage of the landscape. My understanding of Russenurb isn't that necessarily follows, because you could take advantage of landscape and there'd be no Russenurb effect.
Well, if we go on, in doing this, Hamilton produced a broadly symmetrical classical building to sit in the romantic landscape of Carlton Hill. It subsequently built ancillary buildings creating an asymmetric composition across the school side, which can be seen as reflecting the overall picturesque setting and maintaining the feeling of Russenurb, the illusion of countryside within the city when approached from the west. In other words, the later ancillary buildings have not detracted from that feeling of Russenurb, correct?
Yes, that is what that says, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Over the page in your inquiry report, page 47, paragraph 613. At the end of that paragraph, you are saying that the sophisticated architectural responses to a challenging site support your opinion. Can I look, though, at what you're saying at the beginning of the paragraph and so I understand it properly? You say, it is true to say that infilling Hamilton's playgrounds with sandstone-clad buildings that coalesce with and thereby diminish the Hamilton building would be detrimental to the special character of the site. However, it is incorrect to conclude as a consequence of this that no new building should be acceptable. Is this, in this stage of your inquiry report, are you alluding to and referring back to the earlier discussion in your inquiry report of the orthogonal original design, which involved sandstone cladding? Is that what you're referring back to?
No, this comment is separate from any notion of the form of the building. This is simply saying that in the same way that the jail walls and other stone elements in the existing setting can coalesce and do coalesce with the Hamilton building, the introduction of a new element in a matching sandstone would generate more coalescence with the Hamilton building. Whatever the shape or form of that new structure, if the material was sandstone to match the surroundings, it would coalesce with the Hamilton building.
If we go back to paragraph 317 of your inquiry report, then, please, just to understand what you're saying. Page 12. And I think I'm right in saying this is all before the first application, is that right, at this point of the discussion?
That's correct.
It's 317 saying, reviewing the design with the Architecture and Design Scotland Forum process, HA took the view that a bolder, more architecturally distinct approach to the massing and setting of the new wings could produce a design that succeeded in achieving the balance between the apparently competing aspirations for the site. And you cross-refer to figure 5, which is on the other side of the page. And these say there are Hoskins visualizations illustrating earlier orthogonal stone-clad design and revised organic metal-clad design as presented to ADS May 2015. Am I right in thinking, and would the reporters understand your evidence, that organic design, the need to investigate and come up with that design, was a response, an architectural design response to the issues you've identified in 3.17, i.e. the massing and setting of the orthogonal design as we see in the visualization?
Yes, so that was a response to the massing and setting. Your first point was, the point I was making in your first one there was about the materials and how they would help or diminish coalescence. So sorry,
yes,
we could change the scale and massing between, in figure 5, we could change the scale and massing to a more organic, but have kept it as stone clad. And what I'm saying is that in order for it to be successful, we had to do both. We had to move away from orthogonal, linear, and we also had to move away from stone clad.
All right. So the shape of the buildings has changed to a more organic shape, But as the building's experienced from views from the south in particular, and again, depending on light conditions, that more organic and rounded shape might not be that obvious. Would you accept that? They may actually look like flat surfaces from certain viewpoints and certain light conditions.
No, I don't accept. I think that would be obvious. I think the different facets of each elevation between each level would all be quite clearly not a flat surface.
Well, let's take it in stages then. Can we look at CD 10 first of all, which tells us a bit more about the original orthogonal design? CD 10. Now, reading short, Mr. Gibb, as I understand it, this was, as described, a planned response to the scale and massing analysis that had been carried out at an earlier stage where options A, B and C were looked at. Is that correct? I'm sorry, do you have the document? It's CD 10.
So I do. It looks like from the second public exhibition.
It's a according to the description in the core document list, it's a pre-application consultation response for Scheme 1.
That's what I was referring to, yeah.
And as I understand it, it's one of a suite of documents, and at this stage it's coming up with, as described, a planned response to what was learned during the earlier massive options study where options A, B and C were looked at. If we go to electronic page 18 of the document, which is the section entitled Architectural Response.
Yes.
It says here that the success of the building design will depend on the sound resolution of the following complex concerns: the placing of the building in relation to the topography of the hillside, the staging of the building in relation to the 19th century picturesque composition, the appropriate juxtaposition of new building elements within Thomas Hamilton's masterpiece, the successful integration of the numerous and varied hotel facilities into the existing proposed building elements. The aspirations for an architectural language are driven by the dual concern to be deferential to the existing Old Royal High School in terms of prominence on the one hand, and an aspiration to correspond to Hamilton's building in terms of the quality of the architecture of the new buildings on the other. So far, so good. It's the same position now, isn't it?
Yes.
So, following on then, within the notionally symmetrical disposition of the new elements, nuances in how these building elements respond to special conditions, such as the west gable of the west wing addressing the approach, enliven and disrupt this broad symmetry. The notional symmetry lends a cohesive unity to the composition as a whole, whilst nevertheless retaining distinction between its component parts and reinforcing the prominence of the Hamilton building in particular. It is befitting the context of the Hamilton building and the wider context of Carlton Hill and Edinburgh's new town that a pared down classical language may be adopted in the architecture of the new building elements. The aspiration would be an architecture of elegance and restraint that is simultaneously contemporary and rooted in the same concerns shared by Hamilton and his contemporaries. Moreover, in gently echoing, responding to the symmetries, rhythms and proportions, Can you hear me now, sirs? The opportunity exists to create a restrained and dignified architectural foil to Hamilton's masterpiece. Now, you've referred in your inquiry report to the benefits of a bold approach, an assertive, bold approach. That represents a change in the design philosophy, does it not, in terms of what was originally conceived as a planned response to the massing analysis?
We absolutely changed our design approach. This was obviously public consultation, early stage in the project. You can see by the images the type of architecture that we felt at the time would be appropriate for this site. There was a lot of analysis and design development and looking at some of the views that you can see in the subsequent pages of that document that led us to the conclusion that an architectural style that was bold in its contrast with Hamilton would be a better response to the site, creating less coalescence between the Hamilton building and it, and sitting better in the landscape.
Yes, so exactly, which brings me to the point I began with. If you look at the view from Salisbury Crags and the sandstone-clad orthogonal design,
Is it CD10, yes?
Same document, yes. I think I'm referring to the images that you alluded to a moment ago. If you look at the view from Salisbury Crags, it's just down a couple of pages, in fact, one page down. Do you have that?
Yes, view from Queen's Drive.
Yes, and you're explaining that the view was taken. So, if I'm understanding this correctly, was the view taken that following the pre-application consultation exercise, the view was taken amongst the design team that there were design issues and problems associated with the orthogonal approach, and they included the massing of the building and how that was read as a consequence of the materials that had been used and the form of the building as expressed in this particular visualisation?
I would say yes. We were consulting with lots of stakeholders, so CEC were, HES were all contributing to that. This was around the time of the start of the Architecture and Design Scotland design forums, and there was, we were evolving the design with contributions from all those parties.
Yes, but I'm trying to understand what conclusions have been reached internally. You said in your inquiry report that infilling of the playgrounds with sandstone-clad buildings that coalesce with and so on would be detrimental to special character, but that doesn't mean saying that everything would be unacceptable. So what I'm trying to glean from you, Mr. Gibb, is that following the pre-application consultation exercise in relation to the orthogonal design, was the view taken amongst the design team that this particular design response was likely to be viewed as unacceptable because of the massing, the coalescence, and all of the issues that come with that?
Yes, and it was unacceptable within the design team. We were evolving the design and improving and looking at the issues generated by these visualisations as they were being produced to modify as iterative part of the design process. Absolutely.
So it was recognised then amongst the design team that this particular design response would be unacceptable, and what you've done subsequently is to try and overcome that unacceptability through further design refinement. Is that correct?
The design process is about searching for the best response, and this was a point in time that we moved from to a better response, and one that we were, as a team, confident in.
Yes. Is the answer to my question then yes? You moved from a position where this particular design response was internally, amongst the design team, recognised as being unacceptable, but you've tried to move past that through further design refinement as part of the iterative process.
I don't think it is. This was a point in the design process. These were not developed designs. They were very early stages, and we.
If it helps, I'm not putting to you that you take the view that the current design is unacceptable. No. I'm saying that, in light of your evidence a moment ago, that the design team were very much of the view that this design was unacceptable. There's been a need in the design team to look at further potential refinements to try and overcome the issues associated with this design. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's just the characterisation of how we were, as a team, we were developing this. We formed the view that there was a better approach to be explored for the site. We took that decision. We were nowhere near a point of, coming forward with a planning application at this point.
Last point, I hope then, Mr. Gibb, that insofar as the experience of the scale and mass of the building, as experienced particularly from southerly views like Salisbury Crags, like the ones we see in the CD10, and indeed CD 603 and 607, which is why I was interested in your understanding of those. Insofar as they're concerned, whilst the extension wings do look architecturally different, they have a similar appearance in terms of their scale and mass, don't they? In terms of how they relate to the landscape in particular, and their physical bulk and size as compared with the Hamilton building. In those broad terms, they're broadly equivalent, aren't they?
To each other.
Between the scale and mass of the buildings that we see in CD10, in the orthogonal approach, and the scale and mass that we see, for example, in viewpoint 8CO5. But it might be useful to have that briefly before you, please. CD, it's 596, I think. CD 596, it's the Mark van Grieken visualizations.
Oh, could I refer to my inquiry report for this figure 5 on page 13?
I'd rather you didn't, simply because it's not an equivalent photograph to what we see in CD10. If you look at VP 08C05.
Sorry, it's the same photograph as CD10. The top one is exactly the same scheme from the same time.
Yes, it's a different viewpoint. This is from Queen's Drive, the one in your...
So you took me to Queen's Drive, sorry, in CD10.
Let's briefly do both, okay? Page 13 is Queen's Drive.
So
it's the same point, really, that if you look at the eastern and western wings, in terms of the element of landscape backdrop that they eat up, and their relative scale and mass as against the Hamilton building, in broad terms, and I appreciate the architectural details are different, and the way that there's a move from orthogonal to from organic. I appreciate that's different, but in broad terms, in terms of the scale and mass of the extension wings, they are broadly similar, aren't they?
in massing terms, one of the key points was that we were able to move further away from the Hamilton building with every subsequent floor. So in massing terms, they're quite different. They dispose the accommodation on the site quite differently and away from the Hamilton building in a view like this.
Well, let's then look at, if I may please, look at the viewpoint 08C05. 08C05, which is the 2017 proposal in that bundle. Yes, please. It might take you a minute or two to find it. It's not very easily tabulated.
I have that.
And we compare that against what we see in CD10. It's very difficult to make a direct comparison because the lighting conditions are completely different, aren't they?
They are.
But if,
well, not all.
But if we look, for example, at the eastern extension, do we see that as we move from the Hamilton building towards the Burns Monument, eastwards towards the slope of Carlton Hill, the eastern wing, as it's seen from this viewpoint, again on Radical Road, is in has very similar bulk and mass to what we see in CD10. Is that right? And indeed, from this particular point in Radical Road, the eastern extension extends to higher elevation. It's closer to the top of Carlton Hill.
It is, yes. I would consider it to be further away from the Hamilton building, though, and in a much more comfortable relationship with it.
Well, but to take your opinion on that, certainly what I'm looking at is the stepping down from the eastern wing comes right to the Hamilton building. It's not very clear because of the poor quality of the images exactly how that happens, but it certainly goes past the western side of the Burns Monument, doesn't it?
It does, but I think the relationship with the Hamilton building is clear, and you can see the link, single-storey link round to the back elevation with the vegetation above it.
And so instead of one step down, there's a series of steps. Is that right?
That's correct.
But just to be clear, in terms of the broad spatial relationship, the mass and scale of the eastern wing, as experienced from this viewpoint, they're broadly the same, aren't they?
I think your experience of the mass and scale is entirely different in these two images.
Well, let's leave aside the experience then. The visual impact, as one looks from this viewpoint, the buildings appear to have similar scale and mass, don't they?
I'd consider the visual impact to also be less.
If we look to the west, here there is a scaling back, which is more obvious, isn't there? Because the western extension in the orthogonal approach would go further west and would interfere more with the slope of Carlton Hill.
Yes.
But insofar as the Western Pavilion and the Hamilton building is concerned, there's a similar relationship. And I accept that there's because of the more organic approach, there are differences, but in terms of the broad relationship between the two, again, it's very similar, isn't it?
The space it fills above the Pavilion building is a similar space. Again, I think the impact's quite different.
Yeah, and that's because of your architectural response and what you take from the contrasting architectural style that's been adopted for the organic approach, which, in the view of the appellants at least, is emphasising differences, thereby not giving rise to the same issues of coalescence that were identified in relation to the orthogonal approach. Is that correct?
Yes, I think it's clear in these visualisations.
All right. Thank you very much. Nothing else.
Thanks for that, Mr. Mackay. Ms. Coburn, do you have much for Mr. Gibb?
Maybe about an hour.
Is it worth taking our break just now before you start?
Probably.
Okay, let's break until 3:30. Mr. Gibb has an update on the proportion of suites, I think it was. Is that right?
So only half an update. It was to say that for Scheme 1, the suites are 15%. I think I said 25. I just misread that. 15% for Scheme 1, and I will need to go back on Scheme 2.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gibb. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for that. Ms. Coburn.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Gibb, I think you're working off a big paper version, so in fairness, so that you can get it out, it won't be till the end. It is CD249. I'll be working off an electronic version, and I think that will probably suffice. The only other document I think you'll need is your topic paper, your report. Okay. Are you aware that the Crown Office and the Serious Fraud Office operated from the site between 1981 and 1994?
Not of the dates of the use, yes.
And when I was reading your written work, I was struck by the use of quite a lot of comparison and comparator materials between Scheme 1 and Scheme 2. For example, there's a red line showing where the Scheme 1 Western Wing would be compared to where the Scheme 2 Western Wing. It's maybe not a question for you, it may be more appropriate for Mr. Mappin, but can we agree that ultimately the reporter's recommendation and ultimately the decisions that is then made by ministers, certainly in terms of the planning appeals, is each scheme is to be considered on its own merits?
I would agree with that.
Could you have a look at your topic paper, paragraph 2.7, please? And that paragraph, you say, global hotel operators with the expertise required to facilitate delivery of the project were consistent in concluding that the site should accommodate. Are you sure you meant should? Did you mean could or would?
I had noted that myself. I think if if it was to stick with should, I should have put that in the context of that producing a financially sustainable hotel development.
So you're content to stick with should, but with that additional caveat?
With that caveat, yes.
Now, obviously, I'm not an architect, but I'd like to explore with you just some general concepts of architecture and design. Given the importance of the Hamilton Building, anything within its curtilage needs to be respectful of the Hamilton Building.
Yes.
And the way that it was explained to me was that when you are looking at a site, and a particularly complex site such as this, it's, the sense is magnified, but you have a series of spinning plates. And each of these spinning plates represents a matter that needs to be addressed and accommodated successfully. So at the minimum, it was explained to me here, you would need to have as your spinning plates the scale of the existing building, the scale of the curtilage of that existing building, and the scale of the townscape. Now, accepting and running with that premise with me for just a little longer, ultimately the most successful design solution that would come forward would mean that each of those three spinning plates kept spinning and at the appropriate speed before it fell off with a clatter.
Yeah, I think as an architect, I feel I've got a lot more than those three spinning plates. Can you just scale of townscape, scale of site, and scale of building?
Well, kind of. I mean, it was just as a general starting point. You would need to consider the scale of the existing building, the scale of the curtilage of the existing building, and also the scale of the townscape within which that curtilage and that building sat.
Yes, amongst many other things, that is true.
Can we agree, Mr. Gibb, that Carlton Hill is a landscape?
From its top to its bottom, from Carlton Road to its top.
If you take it from the top where the National Monument is and take it down to Regent Road, could we accept that that's a landscape?
Yes.
And can we accept also that the extensions proposed in both schemes 1 and 2 fill in the open space surrounding the Hamilton Building?
They occupy space either side of the Hamilton Building.
When you say they occupy space, would it be fair to say that they occupy a lot of the space on either side of the Hamilton Building?
In floor area terms, on the site, they occupy a significant portion of the site, each side of the Hamilton Building. How that appears from different viewpoints varies.
Okay, so I'm interested, just so if you could pander to my interest a little. Can you tell me how much of the red line site boundary in terms of Scheme 1 and Scheme 2 would be occupied by buildings compared to what it is as it stands currently?
I don't have those figures, sorry. I couldn't answer that.
Was that not something that you considered when you were considering the appropriateness or otherwise of the design solutions?
We considered distances from the building, from its boundary, height, scale, massing. I just don't have the footprint figure relative to site area.
Well, perhaps you could revert to the inquiry with that detail at a later stage. So, can we also agree, Mr. Gibb, that, according to my architect friend, that any design needs to fade to an extent into the landscape? And as I understand your position in very basic terms, it seems to be that both schemes 1 and 2 do that to an extent, not obviously to the point that it becomes invisible, as you said earlier, but to an extent because of the materials that you have chosen and because of the tiering that you have adopted.
I'd say not all architecture need do that, but that was part of the intent of choosing the materials we did.
Can we also agree then, Mr. Gibb, that is the success or otherwise of that architectural treatment is a matter of professional judgment with which others may disagree?
That can be agreed, yes.
I hope we can agree this, but the pavilions that Hamilton designed, the east and west pavilions, they're seen on the oblique, aren't they?
From where, sorry?
Well, for example, if we go to your report, because I think I said that's pretty much all we would go to. If you could look at that, please. I think it's page 27. Yes, indeed it is. It's perhaps a disputed provenance, but that's not the point that I want to explore with you here. But it's figure 13 on page 27.
Yes, I have that.
And to that extent, you can see that certainly the western pavilion, if I've got my east and west round the right way for a change, that is facing towards us. But if you look at the pavilion of the main Hamilton building, that is facing in a different direction. So to that extent, the pavilions are seen at a different angle to the main Thomas Hamilton building.
Yes, the two front pavilions sit off-axis, following the street line.
And so by off-axis even, do you mean the same as oblique?
I'm not sure I do, no. I'm not sure what you mean by oblique.
It's seen at an angle, it's not front-on, was how it was described to me.
Well, I'd say in that photograph, the West Pavilion is seen front on. Sorry, I'm not following.
Well, when you're standing slap bang in front of the Hamilton building, if you could visualise this, because I can't think of a visualisation that would enable us to do that, but assume for the moment that you're standing slap bang in front of the Hamilton building. Would you see the eastern and western pavilions on the same axis, or would they be seen at an angle?
I think viewpoint 21 looks from there towards the West Pavilion. It might help because I'm sorry, I'm not quite following the questioning.
I'm happy for you to look at that, VP. That might help.
So I'm looking at base photography for 21A.
Could you say which document you're in, CD reference?
It's CD 180.
Thank you.
21A.
Essentially what I'm meaning is that Western Pavilion does not sit at the same angle as the Thomas Hamilton building, does it?
No, that's what I meant by off-axis, or maybe using different words for the same point. Sorry.
Okay. So given that you're calling it off-access, I am calling it oblique. Ms. Cunliffe sitting beside me is also calling it oblique, but I think we're broadly on the same level. If you add to these pavilions, part of Hamilton's design, which are at an angle and off-axis, a notional symmetrical design that is considerably bigger than the pavilions, do you think that is an acceptable design solution? I'm assuming the answer is yes, because that's what you're proposing. But do I have that correct?
Yes, I think it's an acceptable design proposal.
And again, can we agree that that is a matter of professional judgment with which others may disagree?
Yes.
Going back to your topic paper and the wee picture. Now, I appreciate that one might be kind of bird-like hovering in order to see it in quite this way, but can we accept that certainly in Hamilton's eye, as you claim there, the National Monument, the Burns Monument and the Nelson Monument are all quite prominent in that picture?
Yes, I think the interesting thing is that I think you're, rather than floating in air, I think you're actually standing where the Burns Monument is actually positioned, and there's been a bit of artistic license used in its location in this photo.
But assuming, therefore, that you're right and there has been a bit of artistic license used and the Burns Monument is miraculously moved up sticks and toddled up the road a wee bit, this is all part and parcel, is it not, of the design intention of Thomas Hamilton at the end of this journey of revelation, when you look back, isn't it?
Sorry, I should have done off. As you have, not getting into the who painted it, I do see this as representative of how Hamilton wanted his building to be perceived, and even to the extent of blocking the jail out with his own Burns Monument.
I think we'll leave the question of the jail for another day, Mr. Gibb. Which jail and when and on what plan and who intended it whenever, I think, is something that we've explored in detail.
I'm
and
fine
don't
with
need
that.
to repeat.
Thank you.
Bear with me whilst the Luddite that I am tries to set up an electronic version so that I can read the figures that we're about to consider, but we're now going to CD 249. Do we all have CD 249 to hand?
Yes.
Okay. If you look at the main centrepiece of the Hamilton building in that drawing, the ridge AOD is 86.72 metres, as I'm understanding that correctly, yes. And the eaves are at 84.91.
That's right.
Okay, move to the west, please. And obviously, you have your proposed drum or centre of civic, whatever it is that Mr. McIntosh refers to. The height of the lift shaft on that western wing is given as 89.84 metres AOD. How much taller is that than the highest point of the Hamilton building?
3.12 metres.
Yeah, that's what I made it. And just to take this shortly and save some time, but the parapet that's next down is ranges between 2.56 metres and 1.775 metres taller than the centrepiece of the Hamilton building. If we scoot across to the eastern side, as we wait for my computer to catch up, we see that the lift shaft is 89.45 metres, but we see that the ridge height of one Regent Terrace is 81.5 metres AOD, and I calculate that to be 7.95, so almost 8 metres higher than the A-listed one Regent Terrace. Do you happen to know what the distance is between one Regent Terrace and that lift shaft and that parapet, which is at 88.49 metres AOD? We calculate it to be about 15 metres or there or thereabouts, but just wonder if you could be a bit more precise for us.
I can't be a lot more precise, but I had it closer to, but maybe not quite 20 metres.
Okay.
Sorry, it's a question, the lift shaft to Regent Terrace.
No, I said the parapet because I started with the lift shaft, and then, Mr. Steele, I went down to the next parapet, which is 88.495 metres. And I appreciate that they're stepped and tiered a bit like a bake-off cake, was how it was described to me, but I haven't gone anywhere near a showstopper because I don't watch Bake-Off myself. But the parapet that is next down is 88.495 metres AOD. And I appreciate that that is set back slightly from one Regent Terrace, but that is almost 7 metres higher than the ridge height of one Regent Terrace. And the next parapet down, which is closer to Regent Terrace, it's not stepped back, that's almost 4 metres higher than the ridge height. That is quite some significant height, isn't it, Mr. Gibb?
It is a height above the ridge, yes.
Are you familiar, Mr. Gibb, with the concept of the right development in the right place?
I understand the words. I don't know if they're a concept I've heard of before.
Okay. You mentioned earlier on when you were reading your precognition that the AHSS had made a fairly positive comment about the design. But given the AHSS's position, can we agree at least that in terms of the AHSS and those instructing me, they do not consider this to be the right development in the right place? It might be the right development, but it is certainly not in the right place.
Yes, and that's made clear in my inquiry report.
Thank you, Mr. Gibb. I have no further questions.
Thanks, Ms Coburn. Mr McIntosh.
Thank you, sir. I'll let you sort yourself out first, Mr Gibb. Please could you have your precognition and inquiry report to hand, and we'll begin at the beginning. So you were part of the team on this project from the beginning, which I understand to be some point in the early part, spring or summer of 2009. Is that correct?
No, sorry. It does say in paragraph 3 that I was from October 2011.
And that's in your precognition. I must have missed it. What paragraph is that in?
3.
I was obviously getting far too excited at that stage. So you can't help me in what was being planned in the 2009 competition entry, can you?
I was in the office of Hoskins Architects at that point. I have to say I was, at that point, contract administrator for the redevelopment of the National Museum of Scotland, so I wasn't on this project. I have looked through our archive and files to gain an understanding, and I did that on coming onto this project in 2011, and I've attempted to do it to aid this inquiry.
Thank you. What I might do is I will take a slightly faster canter through this material, And please tell me if you feel you can't comment on something, because if necessary, no doubt Mr. Wilkinson can comment on his end of these conversations when he's giving evidence. But my understanding, I'll put this a further away from me because it's making a funny echo. My understanding is that sometime in 2009 there was a competition entry by your firm, and we have a copy of one or part of that in EW18, and I'd be grateful if you could look at that. And while that's being got, is it your understanding that this arose out of a procurement process commenced by the Council in June of 2009?
Yes, absolutely. I understand that. That is my understanding.
And have you seen this document before, or something like it?
Yes, this isn't the final submission for that competition.
I sort of suspected that, but I don't know that for sure. But the point I want to take of that probably doesn't matter. I was going to simply take you... Firstly, in evidence with Mr. Wright, I think you were here, I was briefly discussed, and I think Mr. Steele discussed, the handwritten notes on the front page, which bear to be by the late Professor Charles McKean. And I wonder if you can accept a couple of premises. The first is that whatever Professor McKean thought about the 2009 project, we can't really tell what he would have thought of Scheme 1 or Scheme 2, can we?
I can accept that.
Thank you. Now, if we move on to this document, which I do appreciate must have been as part of the process, and go on to the final page, sorry, not final page, page 27 of it, which is almost at the end.
Yes.
And there's lots of numbers in here. I just want to take out, in the top table, fourth row from the bottom, the number of rooms is said to be 156.
I can see that.
So am I right in saying that, as far as you know, from the start of your firm's involvement with these appellants, or part of them, as they started this project, it has always been about a hotel of international standing of around about 150 beds, until such time as the planning committee refused Scheme 1 and you had to have the review exercise that Mr. Wright has told us about?
So I think I have given evidence on this in the inquiry report. I believe the competition submission ended up 150, not 156, but I don't think that is relevant to your point. The time taken by the developer between competition 2010 and 2014 that I was a part of worked with a number of global hotel operators, and they all pointed to a development of this type of scale in order to ensure the viable, sustainable reuse of the building and the site. I'm always reticent to deal in room numbers because, as we discussed with Mr. Thompson, it could be a smaller number of larger rooms or a larger number of smaller rooms, but
that's a very helpful and clear answer. I don't want to expose it to that level of precision. It's a largish 150 bedroom or thereabouts 6-star hotel of international standing, and that has been consistently from the beginning. In a sense, not the client briefs probably have the same meaning anymore, but the client brief with a small c and a small b that you've been dealing with.
When we started, I think this is hopefully relevant, when we started the workshop process 2014 that I was part of, at workshop 1, Gareth presented the likely scale and quantity and what would make up a hotel of this nature. At that workshop 1, it was approximately 17,000 square metres. Obviously that turned out to be slightly less than Scheme 1, but slightly more than Scheme 2.
Yes, and in your report you've given exact figures for that. So, given that you weren't present in meetings either on the Hill or anywhere else between Mr Wilkinson and Mr Hoskins and representatives of DHP who aren't witnesses, from what you've seen from the firm's records, can you contradict the basic advice that was given that, and I need to get this right, that effectively it all boiled down to whether the starting point is the number of rooms or the scale of the hotel or the rather important building and its setting?
I'm afraid I don't recognise that. There was correspondence in 2010 from Edinburgh World Heritage that I took to be the view at that point.
And this, I think, just for the inquiry's completeness, can be found in one of the design and access statements. I shall just make sure I've got the right one in front of me.
Correct.
It is CD 191, and that's for Scheme 2, oddly, at page 135. It's the Appendix A. So, you thought that letter was the advice that was being given to your firm before you were involved?
No, I'm not saying it was the totality of the advice, but I didn't recognise the words that you used from a conversation, so I couldn't say that that was my understanding of advice. I can go on the written documentation.
I understand. So there's not, and I wouldn't be surprised at this, there's not a series of carefully produced solicitors' file notes of every conversation that everyone's had with everybody over the entire period of this project. I'm assuming there isn't.
I'm not aware of them, and yeah, we, as an office, we don't have access to anything of that nature.
I'm just going to go back to EW18 and just show you two things, because I think, just for completeness, I'll give you the opportunity to look at them and comment. I don't want to be accused of not doing that. So if we just go to, I must get my right page here, it's electronic. It's about page, here we are, it's page 12, and it is entitled Precedent. And there's four buildings listed, but one of them that struck me was the reference to the Dol de Gran Hotel in Zurich, which is a Foster and Partners project. I read it as the inspiration for the Grand Budapest Hotel, but that may just be me. But it's a large hotel in Zurich above the city, and Foster and Partners have built two rather large wings on each side. Have you been involved in conversations about the Dol de Gran being inspiration or anything behind what you're doing?
No, but I'm aware it was referenced in here. I'm pretty sure we used it again in workshop 2014 workshop 1 or 2, amongst many varied architectural precedents, and it wasn't an architectural inspiration. And for years after the use of this image, we were, as noted by Mr. Mackay, looking at a completely different architectural approach to this for the site.
And just the final thing on document on this, on the pre-2011 experience. Are you aware, from what you know of what was going on before 2011, that EWH was concerned that you were trying to put too much development onto the site?
Yes, the written documentation from around 2010, although that couldn't be quantified, it was clear that quantum was a concern of everyone's.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the 2014 workshops, when, of course, you were involved, alongside Mr. Hoskins.
That's right.
Now, you there's been discussion, and there is information in your inquiry report on page 8, which is paragraph 3.4. And I just wanted to have a little bit more of understanding. You may remember I discussed with Mr. Wright about options. So I'll just set it up so that we can probably do it quickly. I put it to Mr. Wright, and I took him to various documents in the pre-application consultation reports, that I could see 3 options, A, B, and C. One was a monolith, one was bright pink, and one was sort of where you went with the orthogonal work before you changed your minds. But you say in your mention of workshop 2 at 3.4, analysis of 5 number options. And the question I asked him was there ever an option in the workshops, because our recollection is there wasn't, was there ever an option in the workshops that dealt with a smaller hotel or no development at all on the Western Playground without creating the monolith from 2001 at the other end of the site?
So the 5 options referred to in workshop 1 were sort of distilled to the 3 options that you referred to a minute ago, which were in the planner's report and in the first public consultation meeting. The options dropped from 5 to 3 because amongst the 5 options we were looking at schemes that built along the north elevation of the Hamilton building, infilling the gap between that building and the retaining wall. And they didn't even make it as far as the public consultation event for reasons that Mr. Wright has gone into. The 3 options at public consultation were all of the same quantum, just different dispositions of that across the site. Within the workshop process, we showed hundreds of different options. Some of the workshops worked where we from 3 different angles around the site, in basic modelling terms, showed single story, 2-story, 3-story. So there were options and images of schemes smaller than 150 bed or quantum equivalent thereof. But those options, with everything else brought into it, didn't result in a sustainable, viable scheme that could come forward for planning consideration.
And that would have been because it wouldn't have worked as a hotel with this level of standard, effectively?
Not necessarily a hotel with this level of standard, just not sufficient development to make the whole site viable in terms of what was required for that listed building. You know, it's got needs a lot of work done to it. It didn't support that.
And I suppose just to finish this point, it's been put to me that, in a sense, at that stage, if you squash down one end, it squeezes up somewhere else. In that sense, the problem with limited development on the Western Playground at this scale of quantum is that you get more on the Eastern, and vice versa. And that was something you were dealing with, and you eventually reached the solution that you produced in Scheme 1.
Yes, I think right back from 2009, as is clear, our initial instinct was that notionally symmetrical development either side of the building would be appropriate. But we did in that process, in the 2014 workshop process, look at in quite a lot of detail how an asymmetric approach to the site, more on the east and the west, might look, and how it might impact the building and the setting. And we, with Andrew being particularly strong in his views on that, came back to the decision that a notionally symmetrical proposal was appropriate.
at this point, it's probably appropriate. If we imagine we insert your questions from Mr. Mackay about orthogonal buildings, and I imagine I've just done that, we move on a bit to the solution that you developed. And this solution involved building the two buildings, notionally symmetrical, and then we're talking about Scheme 1 at this stage. Again, I just want to be clear, during the workshops, did you take away that there was a view being given to you by EWH and others that the view as you approach from the west was as important as the long-distance views from the south and east?
Yes, there was a lot of discussion about Western approach, absolutely.
Thank you. Now let's look at what I'd like to do is look at the common elements between the two schemes that I'm going to need to deal with, some of which have been developed by others, so sort of suddenly there'll be gaps, but if they've been developed by others. And then we'll look at the individual schemes. So looking at the common elements first, I get the strong impression that ultimately the reason that you say you didn't build anything, don't want to build anything on the northern facade is because of the views that you formed with the assistance of Mr. Wright about the importance of the northern facade, the importance of the retaining wall, and the importance of the Belvedere. And very broadly, that's the driving force behind this decision to create the entrance the way you did.
Yes, and it being the route originally taken by most people to access the building.
I wonder at this stage if you could have 272, which is the visualization with the tired solicitor in it, and CD 31 and CD 112, please.
Sorry, could you?
So, sorry, not CD31. CD112 and you can say CD112, and I'll get the other one just a moment. I failed to write it down. It's an appellant's document, and it's appellant's document APP 24. Not 24. APP.
It's not 31. No.
It's not 31. I'm obliged to Mr. Steele, but it's not 31. It is APP 23. So we need CD 272, we need CD 112, and we need APP 23. So let's start with the solicitor. So that's CD 272, and he's walking up to the rear of the building, which is now the main entrance. And we can see the eastern building in the extension, beyond the Hamilton building. Now, would you accept, firstly, that the lodge building that you want to demolish was placed in the position that least obscured the view of the Hamilton building from the west?
No, I think there was other positions on the site that would have obstructed the building less than where it is.
Okay, let's look at, we'll have to look at the drawing for that. So that will be a strange document we haven't looked at before, and that is CD 27. And if you're working on an electronic copy, it's page 28. And it's the CFA archaeology report, and there's a series of maps at the end. So I'm not sure the pages are numbered, but if you look at the figures, I'm looking at figure 1I and figure 1J, and they look like 1877, 1894 Ordnance Survey maps.
Yes, I have that.
So if we look at the upper figure, which, as far as I can see, is a plan of the Royal High School on Carlton Hill, and of course, since it's an Ordnance Survey, the prison is missed out, because presumably the French didn't need to know where it was. And it's 1877, so the building is relatively new, and there is no lodge. And then the one below, 1894, we now have a sign saying Her Majesty's Prison, but no details of what the buildings look like, and then we have a lodge that's appeared. Now, all I'm putting to you, really, it doesn't seem that controversial, is that if you've got to build your lodge somewhere near your entrance, which is on the western end of the site, you can see the original Hamilton gates, you can either build it north of the gates or south of the gates. And if you build it north of the gates, which is where they built it, you'll block less of the Hamilton building from the west.
Well, I would say that if you put it south of the gates, it would block a similar amount, but you would get a much better understanding of the Hamilton building walking around Regent Road past the gatehouse. It would be blocking a bit of the west elevation as opposed to the north elevation, and it's the north elevation that gives you the understanding on that approach of what Hamilton was doing here.
Now, there's already been a lot of evidence with Mr. Wright about a discussion about the relative hierarchies of the elevations. I'm not proposing to go back over that because we've been through it with Mr. Wright, and I don't think he accepted the position I'm pushing either. So perhaps if we can take it as read that we're going to disagree about this and move back to APP 23. Now, this is a Hamilton sketch that shows, I understand, at the far end, the Belvedere and the retaining wall. No, you've got a different one. I've got APP 23. It's rather long. It was being shown to Mr. Maskell at one point. I don't know whether... Oh, no, I think it's been found. So it's a copy, I'm assuming, of a drawing entitled Enclosing Walls, New High School. That's the one, yeah, you've got it. So I'll let you open it out to its full extent and check everyone else has got one. So you can see the Belvedere at the far right-hand side of the plan, and you can see the curve. Now, this is a curved wall, isn't it? It's got I always get this wrong, a convex shape.
It is curved.
Yeah. So, given how high the wall is, if you stand by the gates on the site of the lodge house, you can't see the bottom of the Belvedere, can you?
That's right, yes.
We'll ask other people about whether you can see the top of the Belvedere, because that's definitely a visualizations problem. Now, you'll remember the evidence from Mr. Maskell about the viewing platform, and Mr. Steele was talking about it this morning. Can you see roughly at the top of the drawing, there are two details of what Mr. Maskell called pilasters?
Yes.
And you can see one pilaster, as he called it, at one end, and then the other side of the title, there's another pilaster drawn, and there's a little section through it. Now, can we see those pilasters on your drawings? So if we were to look at CD 112, hopefully we'd find them.
They are there.
I'll just allow my glacial computer to warm up. And if we start with the Western Pilaster, just to go with the Western Wing and the Western Pavilion and the Western Hotel, we now have the Western Pilaster. And it, broadly speaking, appears to line up with the western edge of the Western Wing of the Hamilton building.
That's correct, yeah.
And the Eastern Pilaster appears to line up with the western edge of the Eastern Wing of the Hamilton building.
Yes, it's not at the end of the Hamilton building.
So whatever it is, and we don't know, it isn't centred, is it?
The gap between the plasters is not centred on the Hamilton buildings. Yeah, that is
Exactly.
correct.
And also, you've provided some helpful heights over datum. So by the eastern pilaster, the height, I read it as 79.67.
That's a ground level from a topographical survey.
Yes, so that's presumably the tarmac at that position, quite close to that pilaster. And if we scroll to the other one, if my computer will let me go there, the reading is 77.8 metres. So it's a matter, of course, for the reporters who've been up this road, and I think you and I were with them at the time, but that's not a level surface between those two pilasters, is it?
These levels are not the same, no.
So if you park your carriage on the viewing platform and don't put the brakes on, you're going to roll backwards.
I think vehicle access is restricted up that road.
I'm presuming there'll be a horse attached, which will be doing something about it. So let's go back to the west of the site, and you took a view in your precognition in a part that I have paid attention to, paragraph 35, about the gap between St Andrew's House and the Royal High School. So if we can go to paragraph 35. And if we take a sort of run-up at this, you believe in the second sentence that the values of areas of landscape view between the Hamilton building and neighbouring buildings is constantly overstated, and I suspect we're not going to disagree about this, so I'm going to pass over that and move to this approach results in CEC describing the space between St Andrew's House and the Royal High School as being designed when in fact St Andrew's House did not exist when Hamilton was laying out the school site. Now, you heard the evidence from Mr. Wright that when he was laying out the school site, there was this very tall wall. We heard all the stuff about the pavements and some castellated entrances or towers. So that was there, even if it wasn't the full Tate extravaganza. You'd accept that?
Yes, I do.
And you'd accept what I think Mr. Wright and Miss Tweedy both said, that Mr. Hamilton didn't intend there to be a building on the West playground.
Agreed.
Now, I'm not going to go back over the rus in herb at the points that was all being taken from you, other than to note that those instructing me maintain that this is a building that is designed to be seen both from the flank and the front. And so based on that being something that we're putting over, do you accept that the views of the building from the west are intended to be left unimpeded?
I think what I'm saying is from something like North Bridge, they're not unimpeded. The jail walls are there coming across that area to the west of Hamilton.
So when in your inquiry report you say at the end of 612 that unlike the houses of Regent Terrace, the views to the building itself from the south and west were intended to be left unimpeded by planting.
Sorry, is this my precognition?
Sorry, your inquiry report. 612.
Thank you.
So at the end of that sentence, paragraph, you say, unlike the houses of Regent Terrace, the views to the building itself were from both the south and the west were intended to be left unimpeded by planting, and this remained the case until the misconceived car park landscaping works of the 1970s. That doesn't mean Waterloo Place, because that's how I read it.
No, south and west, on an arc, North Bridge, south, views to the building itself, of which there was never any. But the point is that Regent Terrace, the buildings have a planned row of landscaping in front of them. The Hamilton building does not.
So the Hamilton building doesn't have in its front, we'll call it its southern frontage, draw a line from the end of Regent Terrace until you hit what was the prison and it's now St Andrew's House. That's supposed to be open, you say, and those instructing me would agree.
That's right, yeah.
But we're saying also that the view down Waterloo Place, or when it curves into Regent Terrace, we don't really know where it turns, that view of the Hamilton building is also supposed to be unimpeded, or at least to be revealed gradually in a picturesque manner from the flank.
Yes, there was no planting proposed in that view by Hamilton.
Now, you have, I obviously ascribed this phrase to you, but it's not yours. You've just created a new urban realm, you've called it in the business, in the design and access statement. So we'll call it a new urban realm. We won't call it a tower of civic presence. But you've created in Scheme 1 an urban realm in this view. So I wanted to look in your... Have you still got the visualizations 31 and 30 from Scheme 1 to hand? Because they're probably the easiest to look at. So it's 30, I think, is the one to look at. While you're doing that, I will close down some windows before my computer gives up on me.
Which document?
So it's CD30, please, sir. And it's visualization 4A, if memory serves me correctly, the before, as it were. Now, this I've taken to be, in a sense, the arrival, or the near arrival, at the crucial point, I think it was Mr. Wright's expression, where you come out through this gap between Carlton Hill on your left and St Andrew's House, or a prison on your right, and you're faced with this open view. You have, behind you, you've got part of an extinct volcano in Carlton Hill, and in front of you, you've got Salisbury Crags, you've got an actual extinct volcano, and you've got Winnie Hill. And you've got the Royal High School to your left, and you can see below you, if you go far enough, or you know it's coming, the Palace of Holyrood House and the Cannon Gate. Now, if we think about Edinburgh and its topography, this is... I mean, I appreciate it's different when you stand on the castle and you look around or top of a hill, but this is one of the best reveals, isn't it? You suddenly open up and this amazing view happens. And yet you want to put an urban realm here in a piece of non-urban landscape.
Well, I'd consider that reveal not to be until you're down past the gates of the school, and as Colin McWilliam describes, where the high school building is piled up on to the side of you, which you have to go a lot further round before you get Hamilton's portico and what his school is all about. You don't get that here. So it is part of the reveal and it's part of the journey, but everything that you described is not until you're further along that journey before you get it.
I think that's going to be an area, not even professional disagreement, but possibly disagreement amongst individuals. And we can leave it to reporters to go and have this walk. We keep sending them on, or I keep sending them on, to have a look. I wanted simply to move on to the process, or part of the process, that you carried out after the refusal of Scheme 1, and this is the Landscape Capacity Study, CD 192. Now, I was going to suggest that we go quite quickly, because I think we looked at this document before with Mr. Wright, to page 14 and start there. And by all means, stop me if there are other pages that interest you. 14. So 14 seems to be where the authors of this, Rankin Fraser, explain the nature of the study, and I notice one of the factors is they didn't consider economic or bedroom capacity numbers in it, and they looked at the capacity of the landscape. And on this page and the next page, there are various drawings which are replicated in the design, some of them in the design and access statement for Scheme 2.
That's correct.
Now, again, as part of the HIA assessment, Mr. Mackay took Mr. Wright to these. I'm hoping you will accept something that I'm going to put to you. That once the exercise had been carried out, of which this was part, and there were many other parts, your new scheme, Scheme 2, whatever it does, whatever its other advantages and disadvantages, has greater development than this landscape capacity study is suggesting that there should be.
So, the first thing to say about these images is that they are all mutually exclusive. They don't add up to... that there is no architectural form that could match what each of these do. This is like in a view-by-view analysis, what is the capacity of that view? The second thing I say is that it's not to scale. It's not suggesting that if the green arrows were slightly shorter, that wouldn't be okay. But given that, I do accept that in these views, Scheme 2 doesn't correspond to every black line that you see in these sketches.
There is a solution that does meet every single one of those images, isn't there? You could not build anything on the Western Playground. But then you wouldn't be able to fit in a 150-bedroom hotel of international standing or something like that. Yes, sorry, there is, isn't there, a solution? Is the solution that would meet all these requirements not building anything on the Western Playground?
Well, this also takes into account a view that, or an opinion that accommodation to both sides of Hamilton is appropriate, and this is how it may be disposed for in terms of landscape capacity.
But you've explained what you think Scheme 2 does in relation to some of these views, and I appreciate it's a view-based system. Let's move on to the Architecture and Design Scotland workshops in 2015. You've referred to them in your, and this is CD 293, you referred to them in your inquiry report at paragraph 3.18.
Yes.
This is under some Queen's Drive views, which we've just looked at with Mr. Mackay, and it says that you report in there that their final project proposal in May 2015 considered that the 7 points of the Council's list to be largely addressed. Would you accept there's more to their report and their observations than that?
Yes, absolutely.
And in particular, a paragraph 3.14, which is on page 4 of their report, which is electronic page 7 of the document, 3.13 rather, they say, in the second sentence, nevertheless, the issue of quantum has yet to be fully addressed, and a further reduction in the proposed scale of development at the West Playground will be beneficial in doing so. And you presumably you read that at the time.
Yes.
And as Ms. Coburn has taken from you, a lot of the issues and the disagreements about your scheme amount to professional judgment of you as an architect about what this site can absorb, and other people can reach different conclusions.
Yes, and that paragraph goes on to acknowledge the other factors like commercial case and the investment in the public realm. Yes,
it does. And earlier within this document, there's also acknowledgement by Architectural Design Scotland that they hadn't assessed against the planning test. So this process is very much part of the development rather than a definitive sanctification of anything or a veto on either way.
I don't think I presented it as either. I agreed.
I absolutely accept that you haven't. Now, I'd like to turn on to a couple of other issues. I'm looking at the time. I think I can finish, sirs, but if you get nervous, then please interrupt. Can we turn on to the issue of glass? Could you perhaps have CD 607 and CD 603, the images, we don't know who produced them, but I think I can still take this from you. You have those. Now, all I want to take from you is that although I entirely understand, and the reporters will understand, that your buildings are not orthogonal and therefore very few external surfaces in this building are parallel to any of the other ones, every window is glass, and there are a lot of windows in your hotel.
Yes.
And that many of them are south-facing.
Yes.
And there'll be sunlight reflection from them. And that these drawings, we're going to presumably get into whether they're accurate at this stage, but just for the purposes of broad impressions, both of them appear to be showing evening or afternoon sun reflecting off some of the windows in your two wings.
That's what it shows. Could I note that the Hamilton building itself has south-facing windows in this view, and sunlight is not reflecting off them?
Mr. Innes has just said sort of because they're filthy, which may well be may well be a good point. I'll leave that question to others who are expert at these things. But all I want to take from you is that you would accept that there are going to be points in the day when there's a lot more glass on this hill facing the sun than there is now, and there will be some more reflection.
When we have sun, that is the case, yes.
Now, I also wanted to look about lighting, and could you have CD 210, which is the lighting notebook? And while you find that, I just want to make clear that I'm not attempting to challenge any of the conclusions of the author of this report, because they're not here, and that's not my purpose. So perhaps just to set this up, if you could turn to page 8, please. Bottom of page 8, we have two photo montages.
Sorry, I don't have page numbers now.
Oh, at the very bottom of the page, very small numbers, page 8. It's electronic page 9.
Okay, yes.
I suppose it's the enthusiasm. I'll have a big document and a very small page number. Looks great until we look at it on a computer. And what we seem to have here is two images. The left hand is said to be existing. The right hand is said to be proposing. And what I was struck by in this is that your hotel doesn't appear to have a lot of lights on. Now, I'm not challenging the evidential basis for why Arup have worked out that that's going to be the case, because in their report they've explained on page 11 how they're going to light these rooms. And if you turn to page 11, there are some nice pictures. Again, I don't know where the dividing line between interior decor and architecture comes, so please tell me if I've crossed it too far. But I got the impression from looking at these drawings that this was a lighting system with trying not to reflect light outside and trying to keep lighting levels through the windows low. And in fact, I remember there's some mention of a specified special type of glass. Does that ring a bell for you?
Not necessarily glass, but everything else you said there about the lighting scheme is correct.
So, in order for the Arup conclusions on low-level lighting, and for example, I noticed there are drawing rooms in Regent Regent Terrace that are done sight brighter than any of your bedrooms' windows, that is dependent on doing something like this. I mean, not necessarily this, but some solution that is designed to intelligently try and restrict light through the window.
That is part of the proposal that would have that effect, yes.
Thank you. Can we turn on to hotel servicing? Now, at this point, we need a few drawings, some of which they're all plans. So we need CD 156, which is a visualization, CD 129, which is a section, CD 118, which I hope is a plan of the basement, and CD 226, 236, and 273, which should, broadly speaking, mirror those for Scheme 2. And if anyone wants that repeated, I'm happy to do so. But Mr. Thompson has taken you through the basement, as it were, and I don't really want to go for the walkabout. I did wonder if he would describe it as the elderly solicitor walking through the basement, but perhaps not. If we think about the basement in Scheme 1, while the drawings are being got for you, you'd accept that a relatively large amount of hill is dug out and 2 layers of basement are created, in the bottom of which we have a plant room, a loading dock that takes 2 non-articulated lorries that have to reverse in, and there's lots of internal stores. And then as we go up, it becomes more public, but still not that many windows.
Yes.
And that proposal would have been probably terribly convenient for the hotel operators, because it's all indoors and they can just put things where they want them, and they can shut the door on it at the end of the day, and the residents of Regent Terrace won't complain about what's going on, because it'll all happen behind your copper doors. If we look at CD 156.
Yes, there was an aspiration at this point that vehicles would be off-street.
Now, all I wanted to do extra from what Mr. Thompson's already taken you through is in CD 156 we have a visualization of the treatment of the doors, and I noticed that you surrounded the entrances sort of with copper. And I'm sure part of that is design, and I wouldn't presume to criticise your design, but is it also partly to protect the stonework?
I wouldn't have said that was the intent. It was about a consistent language for interventions into the existing building. So the front doors to the hotel at the rear of the Amazon building have a similar copper surround.
Sorry. Okay, so that was your aspiration for Scheme 1, and if we look at the plan, we'll look at the section CD 129, we can see our lorry reversing in through the area behind what was the door, and I think you took the reporters down to this door that is there at the moment. This is a demolitions drawing, and if my memory is correct, you went down the red stair that's to be removed into that what is now going to be a loading dock. Does that ring a bell?
Yes.
And so now we have a lorry which has reversed in instead, and presumably will have a height limit on its for how big the lorry can be, but perhaps that's not important. But the lorry reverses through this space down into the loading dock.
Yes.
Now, if we now look at Scheme 2, you're going to use the existing door, and I wanted to look at the plans. That's CD 226.
No, I've got the plan as 226.
Sorry, well, let's start with 226, which is the plan. Now, we know what's here because Mr. Thompson's taken you through it, but the service yard which is the same space that you were down in with the reporters, is 37 square metres.
Yes.
And that's slightly smaller, slightly bigger than the smallest bedroom in your hotel, and slightly smaller than the next size up, because they range from 35 to 45, and then it's suites.
Okay, yes.
And so this bedroom-sized space has a corridor with double doors that runs up to past the cold rooms and then out to all the various housekeeping departments, apart from refuse, which has another set of double doors into it.
That's correct.
Now, you say that you haven't actually met Rosewood to discuss these drawings. You just know they've been approved by them. Have I got that right?
So the developer has a hotel architect that liaised with us and with Rosewood as a kind of conduit between the parties. So, as I said earlier, all proposals have been approved.
And so what's the name of the hotel architect?
He's an in-house urbanist. I'm not actually sure if that's the case or not. He works for Urbanist Group.
So if we had a witness from Urbanist Group, we can ask them that question, but there isn't a witness from Urbanist Group. So who else do you think we should ask about this process?
I don't believe you need to ask anyone else. Our drawings went to Rosewood, came back with comments, back and forward through the process.
Sorry, what process is it that's been questioned, sir? I'm at a loss.
Well, perhaps I should expand my questions a little bit further, Mr. Steele. So let's think about the different types of waste and supplies in a hotel. So did you investigate or did you receive instructions of how many deliveries there would be of wine and beer and spirits each week or day into this hotel in Scheme 2?
No, we didn't receive that level of information. I mean, it's my understanding that hotels, even within Edinburgh city centre, are serviced from the street in this way currently. It's something that city centre hotels have to deal with all the time, and they make it work. And I believe them when they approve these drawings, knowing the proposals as they are.
I don't think anyone's disagreeing that a city centre hotel, from their point of view, can't service off the street. The question is, what's the effect on the character and amenity of the conservation area? So, do you know or how many deliveries this hotel is expected to have each day in terms of separate vehicles on an average week?
No, but I think there might be another witness that could address that.
That maybe is what I was angling at, Mr. Seal. Can you assist me?
Not personally, but we do have a witness that's coming, and Mr. Mappin will be ready, if not willing and able, to answer questions about deliveries and the like.
Oh, that's excellent. So what I want to do at this point is perhaps I would invite Mr. Mappin, if he hasn't done so already, to read EW17 and Mr. Price's recognition, and we can take it up with him then. Now, let's move on to the importance of the Royal High School. And we're back to your design and access statement, which I'm still hoping for Scheme 1. Still hoping you still have. So it's CD 41.
I have that.
Now, it's section 1.3. Now, just to check, a design and access statement, I'm to work on the basis that it is the firm's, in a sense, corporate projection of what it understands it was trying to do when it produced the design at the time it's lodged. So it might not be historically entirely complete about every single thought you ever had. It's, in a sense, how you would like to project you had the process, because you're applying your minds to it.
Yes, it's an explanation of the design process and conclusions.
And so it's nothing wrong to, and I'm not going to actually criticise it for being ex post facto or anything like that. That's not my point.
Sorry,
I'm not criticising it for being a rationalisation after the event or any of that. That's not what I'm into. But if we go to 1.3, it's called Planning, Policies and Guidance. And it lists the listed buildings, and I won't get into that. And at the bottom of the first column, it says, of particular importance to the planning context in which the development of the Royal High School site will be addressed is the concept of outstanding universal value. The documentation relating to the UNESCO Old and New Towns of Edinburgh World Heritage Sites describes in very broad terms what is seen to constitute the OUV of the sites. Within the UNESCO inscription and the World Heritage Site Management Plan, the former Royal High School is not specifically referred to, and its contribution is not made explicit. And then over the page, we have more text, and the final lines are, there can be no doubt that the Royal High School building plays an important part in the overall composition of the World Heritage Site, and this is at the heart of the applicant's vision for the building and its environs. Now, I get the impression from this that you would have liked to know more at the stage of your design work about the role the Royal High School plays in the World Heritage Site. Have I got that right?
No, I don't think that's the point being made there. I'm happy that it's, and agree with it saying that, as is my view, that the building plays an important part in the overall composition of the World Heritage Site. So I think that covers it.
When you were doing your research into the history of the building and perhaps its role in the World Heritage Site, did you look at the nomination document, the full nomination document?
Yes, I'm sure I did, and others in the team, and we had extensive consultations through the design process. So we, with many parties here today, so we had a good understanding of the importance of the building.
If you could look at CD 485, the full version. And turn to page 108 when you get it.
Sorry, I didn't hear this.
Page 108, please. CD 485. Now, I'm worried that might be the wrong one because I gave a fresh copy at the beginning of the inquiry. It's in there, yes, that's fine.
Page number again? I'm not.
108, electronic page 109 for the rest of us.
I have it.
I don't yet, but I'll get there. Now, that page is the Royal High School of entry, isn't it? And it does describe it as the noblest monument to the Scottish Greek revival and perhaps the single building which most justified Edinburgh's epithet, the Athens of the North. And the design was conceived integrally from the Royal National Monument on the hill above. Now you see that there, and if you go back to page 7, where there's a discussion about that part of the new town,
Yes.
Sorry, it's page 7. There's 3 paragraphs after from the bottom. There's a reference to the Royal High School building in the middle of the paragraph, and then it refers to Royal Terrace. And it seems to be suggesting that this hill is an important part of not only the World Heritage Site as a piece of topography, but also the idea of Edinburgh as the Athens of the North. And this is perhaps the primary contribution that this building makes to outstanding universal value. Would you accept that?
This is.
Perhaps I'm going too fast because I'm
What
trying.
is the primary?
I'm trying to suggest that this document, that you could have absorbed this document at the time, and had you read it, particularly page 108 and page 7, you would not have observed that the Royal High School and its contribution to OUV is not made explicit within the designation of the World Heritage Site?
I agree with that, yes.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to move on, finally, to a topic which was covered by Mr. Thompson in part. So you'd explained, which I think came to a slight surprise to some of us, that the way you've dealt with Rosewood through Urbanist. Could that have been through Mr. David Olson, by any chance?
David was...
Could you repeat that name again, please?
David Olson. If you don't know...
I'm trying to recall... I'm just trying to recall the sequence. I'm not sure David was involved in the project when Rosewood were...
Mr. Gibb, if it's not relevant to Scheme 1, I don't need to go there.
I think he was prior to this.
I'll discuss it with Mr. Mappin, I'm sure. I just want to get some clarity about who your client was. Now, at the beginning, before you were involved, I'm quite clear from everything I've read that your answer to this question should be Dudlington House Properties, at the very beginning. And then there's a point when it changes and Urbanist gets brought in. Have I got that right?
That's correct, yes.
And then there's another point when Rosewood begins to be mentioned. But although you never meet them, you know they're involved from some time around 2014. Again, have I got that right?
I'm not sure it was I don't know that it was 2014, but Rosewood were never our client. Our client is the joint venture between Duddingston House Properties and Urbanist Hotels.
Given that one of the arguments that your clients make is that there is an economic benefit from this hotel, and there are other witnesses who speak to the scale and calculation of that, and that there is an arts and cultural benefit from this hotel, and there are documents that speak to that, do you, or are you able to help us to the nature of the relationship between Rosewood and DHP Urbanist? And the reason I ask is this, because I don't want to get into too much commercial stuff. Who do people rely on to deliver all this wonderful stuff in terms of, what's it called, a sense of place?
Sorry, no, I can't give evidence on that.
That's very helpful.
I'm not aware.
Now, I want to just finally deal with a sort of final bit about the issues that Mr. Thompson was talking about the arts and culture strategy. I'm not going to go back through the document, but you expressed in your precognition that this hotel could only be used for a hotel. I think you said a 6-star hotel, a 5 or 6-star hotel. Tell me what you meant.
No. I don't use stars. I would have said luxury hotel.
So when we look at APP3, which is the document that Mr. Thompson took you to, and I notice it's signed by Mr. Kett, who is a witness in session 2. And I don't want to ask you about whether it's right, because that's not for you. I'm sure that's for Mr. Kett, and we can ask him then. But the one thing that struck me, and again, because you've obviously thought about how your building can be used, if we go back to page 7 and the table, I've just been struck that in table 2.1, by the measurement of guest room size, I think the smallest room's 35 square metres, having looked at the plans, but no, that you can correct. They go up to 45, then they become suites. I'm always disappointed the suite is not more than one room, but maybe that's just a matter of being out of date. So in terms of size of rooms, it does seem to be in the right-hand column, luxury. In terms of the number of bedrooms, it could be in pretty much any column. And in terms of the suite ratio, at 15% in Scheme 1, it's in the full service column, not the luxury column. Now, can you help me about why Rosewood chose a 15% suite size, and why someone told you to make them 35 square metres or bigger rooms? Where did those two instructions come from?
think even before Rosewood, we had an understanding of the room size, the acceptable room size to hotel operators of this nature. So as architects, we knew that and developed the schemes and options on that basis. We did, within different designs and building envelopes, we did different showed different suite ratios. And I'm hesitating to say it must have been the operator agreed to the suite ratio that we showed.
Well, I'll take it up with Mr. Mapping. I don't want to push you on. One final thing, which I should have done earlier on when we were talking about the Belvedere, but I forgot to do. Could you please look at CD247, which was the north elevation from Scheme 1, which you will remember looking at with Mr. Thompson. But can you go right to the eastern end when you get it, and that others may be able to zoom in on their computers?
I have that.
You will do fine. 247. Now, all I wanted to ask you is, let's imagine that you're walking down towards the Belvedere because you've heard so much about this Belvedere. This is a Belvedere, incidentally, and a wall which you can't see apart from the gap between that and Regent Road, I understand. So you can't see this Belvedere other than from the gap between the end of the building and Regent Terrace, or from Carlton Hill Drive. That's the only two places you can see it from.
Yes, or from one of the bedrooms.
Well, indeed. So you walk along the narrowing gap, and there are some people here. So before we get to the people who are squashed, who are trying to get around the corner, there's a group of people having a lovely time about 5 rooms in, and there's a smaller group of people, 2 people I think, 2 rooms in. Now, am I right in thinking that these people are standing directly in front of fully glazed bedrooms?
I think the plan shows a landscaped area in front of the bedrooms.
But these
the walkway is not directly.
So whilst they can't stick their fingers, their faces to the window like the small boy in the sweet shop, they are looking into floor-to-ceiling glazed bedrooms, aren't they?
They're a reasonable distance away. It's no different to windows in the new town that the street pavement walks past.
Oh.
Roughly speaking, how far away would they be?
5 metres.
Well, I think earlier on you gave evidence that it was 2.5 metres between... No, you didn't. I was putting words in your mouth. Sorry. If you look at CD228... So this is the upper ground floor plan for Scheme 2, if I've got the right document. And it shows landscaping and it shows bedrooms. I thought it was quite a good place to finish up.
That's right.
Let us stand at the steps, the bottom of the steps going up for the fireman stairs.
Yes.
I'm assuming then we have a ramp down because we have arrows. Are those arrows going up on the footpath? I'm always very bad at reading these things.
Yes, they would. They're indicating a slight slope to the slope that exists to the ground level.
So we're sloping down towards the Belvedere, if I've got that right.
That's right.
And we pass what could be, but it doesn't really matter if it isn't, possibly a place to put a bicycle.
That's correct.
And then if we go past the first fire exit passageway through the landscaping, what distance would you say that the path is from the windows at that point?
It's about 5 metres there.
And so as you go to the next one, almost at the end, near bedroom 30, it's a little bit less than that, but certainly 3-4 metres, that sort of distance.
That's right, and there's the opportunity for that landscaping to deal with any overlooking issues.
So I just want to understand the competing pressures on the hotel operator here. So the person in bedroom 30 wants to look out, presumably because they would like some light in their north-facing bedroom below a retaining wall on the on the south side of Carlton Hill. And they would also like not to have people seeing them wandering around in their underwear. At the same time, people will be going to look at the Belvedere because it's really interesting, and it's so interesting you've designed your entire hotel scheme to expose it. Do you see there's an inconsistency there?
No, the whole scheme is not to reveal the Belvedere. It is a conservation benefit. This, I don't see an inconsistency.
And so although a lot of the scheme, if I've understood you and Mr. Wright correctly, your site analysis turns on your opinions about the northern retaining wall and how it relates to the northern facade. And we don't need to go into it again, but I've got the impression that it's really important to you, the northern facade and the northern wall and the Belvedere. And it tells you a lot about Hamilton's intention because you've said it a lot in your evidence.
It is important, and it starts from the far end of the site and the view to the central temple.
Yeah, and if this gap didn't exist and was only available for earwigs, then no one will be arguing about it. But we seem to have a position where if someone signs up to stay in this 6-star hotel with all these marvellous services, and if they get offered bedrooms 21 to 32, they're going to get a view of a wall with a lot of enthusiastic architectural historians wandering down to have a look at the Belvedere. Will they be required to pull the curtains so that no one can see in?
I don't believe so.
I think that's probably almost all I have for it. It's the end of the day. Just want to clarify one thing. Could your position be summed up as an architect as follows? That you've been asked to design a hotel of international standing, and you've done your best in your mind to reflect where it is, and a bunch of other people think it doesn't achieve the conservation listed building and OUV objectives, but you've still tried to design the best international hotel that you think you can design at that location. Is that roughly what your position is?
My position is that we have designed a fantastic hotel in this location, taking all the considerations that are required into account to provide a viable, sustainable future for the Royal High School building.
And ultimately be up to Scottish ministers about whether you're right or not.
It will.
No further questions, sir.
Thanks for that, Mr. McIntosh. So we will continue with Mr. Gibb tomorrow. Can we just check with Mr. Innes? Do you have much for Mr. Gibb?
No, I don't have a lot, and quite a lot what I was going to cover has been meticulously covered by my learned friend acting for the council.
So an hour or less, perhaps. Do you have anything for this witness, Ms. Nimmo?
No, most of it has already been covered.
Okay, thanks. So fairly early tomorrow morning we should be on to the following witness, who is Professor Murray.
Professor Murray, sir. I wonder whether any indication can be given as to whether there's a realistic prospect of getting on to Mr. Van Grieken after that. I have to say that I've been again surprised, and I shouldn't be, I realise by now, as to the time it's taken with Mr. Gibb, and I wonder if I'm going to be surprised in the time it's taken with Professor Murray. I'd hoped to get through 2 architects today, and my hopes have been dashed. But is there any realistic prospect of Mr. Van Grieken?
Can others comment on that question?
From my perspective, sir, there's a reasonable prospect of getting to Mrs. Van Grieken tomorrow.
Agreed.
Yes, certainly. I don't want to ask too many questions of Professor Norrie.
Okay, thanks for that. Well, so that
That's
sounds realistic.
that's encouraging, sir.
Okay, great. Anything else before we close? No? Okay, 9:30 tomorrow morning.